The station that is not on any map. I am writing this 3 days after it happened. Not because I needed time to calm down. I have been calm since that night. Calmer than I probably should be. I am writing this because 2 people I told smiled in a certain way. The kind of smile that means they were listening but did not believe. And I started to feel that if I do not write it down now, the clearest version of what happened will begin to blur at the edges. So this is not to convince anyone. This is only a record. I work in Shinjuku. The commute home is the Chua line, exit at Koenji, 7 minutes on foot to my apartment. 2 years of the same route, 5 days a week. I know every station. I know how long between each stop. I know which door to stand at, so I come out directly in front of the stairs. That night was a Thursday. The date does not matter. I left the office just past 11. Overtime, not the first time. Last train from Shinjuku. Last carriage, as always, because it is the quietest. In the entire carriage, there was one other passenger. A man sitting at the far end of the opposite row, facing the window. Dark coat, neat hair. I did not look any longer than that. Last train, late night. Strangers do not invite attention. I sat down, put in my earphones, closed my eyes. The plan was to sleep 2 stations. I have always been good at waking on time. What happened next is that I woke up and the train was still moving. That was not immediately concerning. I assumed I had slept longer than usual. I took out my earphones, checked the time on my phone, 0:14. Past midnight. I sat up and looked out the window. What was outside was dark. Not dark like a tunnel. Not dark like the ordinary space between stations. Dark like there was nothing outside. No lights, no shadows of buildings. Nothing moving or reflecting the light from inside the carriage. I thought maybe there was a problem with the lights along this section of track. I checked my phone for my position on Google Maps. No signal. Still not panicking. Signal drops in long tunnels. I waited. The train slowed. Stopped. The doors opened. The station was small. Smaller than any station on the Chua line I had ever seen. A narrow platform, a low ceiling, a single fluorescent light that flickered once, then held. The station sign hung from a standard post in the standard format with the standard font, but the name on it was not a name I recognized. Kisaragi. I had never heard it. Not a station on the Chua line. Not a station on any line I knew. I stayed in my seat. The doors stayed open for a few seconds, then closed. The train did not move. I glanced toward the other passenger at the far end of the carriage. He was still in exactly the same position, still facing the window, had not moved at all since I first saw him at Shinjuku. The doors opened again. This time there was a sound from outside. Not a loud sound. The sound of footsteps on the platform. Slow and even, approaching from the far end of the platform that I could not see. I could not see the source from where I was sitting. The footsteps stopped. Directly outside the doors of my carriage. Nothing came in. The doors closed. The train moved again. I did not get off at that station. I want to be clear about that because both people I told immediately asked why I did not get off to find help. The answer is simple. Something in me that is older than logic decided that getting off was the wrong choice. Not a thought. Not a calculation. Something deeper than either of those things. That simply said no. The train was moving again. Outside was still dark. I looked at the other passenger more carefully this time. He was sitting in a way that was wrong. Not wrong in any way I could immediately point to. His back was straight, his hands were on his knees, his head was turned toward the window. Posture that was too perfect. Too still. People who sleep on trains have their own way of being imperfect. A head that tilts, shoulders that drop, the rise and fall of breath visible in the movement of their back. This person had none of that. I watched his back. It did not move. Not at all. For several minutes I watched and could not detect a single movement of breath. I looked away to the window. Outside was still dark. Then the train slowed again. The second station, smaller than the first. Half the platform lights were out. There was a station sign, but from the window I could not read it. Too far, or the letters were too small, or something about the light made it impossible to bring into focus. The doors opened. This time there were no footsteps, only silence. Silence that was different from ordinary silence. Not the absence of sound, but something that seemed to actively absorb sound, including the sound of the train itself. I realized I could not hear the engine. The train was still there, its lights still on, but the engine made no sound. 30 seconds. 40 seconds. The other passenger at the far end of the carriage stood up, slowly, with a deliberateness that was too controlled for a spontaneous movement. He stood, straightened his coat, and walked toward the open doors. His steps were even and heavy. He did not look at me at all. He stood in front of the open doors, his back to me. I held my breath. He did not step off. He simply stood there, at the threshold of the open doors, facing the dark platform. The doors closed. He was still inside. He walked back to his seat, sat down in exactly the same posture as before, facing the window. The train moved. I do not remember how much longer the train ran after that. What I remember is that suddenly outside the window there was light again. City lights, buildings, an elevated highway, everything back to normal, back to the Tokyo I knew, as though nothing had happened. The train stopped at the next station. Nakano. I know Nakano. Nakano is on the Chua line, one stop before Koenji. I nearly cried when I saw the name on the board. I stood up, walked to the doors, got off. On the platform I turned and looked back into the carriage. The other passenger was still in his seat, still facing the window, still not moving. The doors closed. The train left. I got home at 1:23. I checked the Chua line online. No station named Kisaragi. No station between Shinjuku and Nakano that I did not recognize. No reports of any disruption on the line that night. I searched again with different words. Kisaragi. Station. Missing. What I found were old forum threads. People claiming the same thing. A train stopping at a station that did not exist. The same name. Always at night. Never any clear photographs. Never any proof. I closed the browser. I showered. Ate leftover onigiri from the fridge. Slept. The next day I told Hannah, a colleague who often takes the same train home. She listened until I finished and then said maybe I had fallen asleep on the train without realizing it. Maybe half asleep. Maybe stressed from the overtime. I did not argue. I told my older sister by phone. She laughed quietly and said I had been watching too many horror videos online. I did not argue with her either. But sometimes, in the middle of a meeting or at lunch or just before I fall asleep, I think about that passenger standing in front of the open doors, his back to me, facing the dark platform. At the time I thought he was going to get off and changed his mind, but he never looked toward the platform. His head never moved. His body never leaned forward the way a person does when they are deciding whether to step out. He just stood there, still, facing the darkness outside the doors, like someone holding the doors open for something else. And the doors closed before that something had the chance to come in. I do not know if that was luck or something else entirely, but I still take the Chua line every day. Last carriage. And since that night, I have never closed my eyes on a train again. One last thing. If you have ever experienced something like this, if a train stops at a station you do not recognize, at a name that does not exist on any map, on a night that is too quiet, do not get off. Whatever you see outside, whatever sounds like help, stay in your seat. The train will move again. Do not get off. The first thing I noticed was how cheap it was. The second thing I noticed was that I did not care. I had been in London for 6 years. Long enough to forget what silence sounded like. Long enough to let the job, the commute, the flat with its thin walls and thinner windows, grind something out of me slowly and quietly until one morning I stood in front of the mirror and did not quite recognize the person standing there. My therapist called it dissociation. I stopped going in March. The trip was not really planned. I mean, technically it was. Flights booked. Dates cleared with my manager. A week of leave I had been carrying since the year before. But there was no itinerary. No reason. Just the vague and desperate logic of someone who thinks, I need to be somewhere that is not here. Japan had always been at the back of my mind. Half dream, half promise. Something I would get to eventually. Eventually became October. I found the listing 3 days before my flight. A forum thread. Someone had posted a roundup of short-term apartment rentals in Osaka. Privately managed. Cash-friendly. Outside the big platforms. Most of them were ordinary. One was not. 2,800 yen a night. Namba area. Private apartment. Tatami room. Fully furnished. I refreshed the page twice. The price did not change. The listing had 4 photos. A tidy room. A small kitchen. A bathroom with a frosted window. And a view of the street below from the 2nd floor. The description was short. Quiet building. Convenient location. Suitable for solo traveler. The reviews were sparse. 3 of them. 2 in Japanese. 1 in English that said only, clean enough. Left after a few days. I booked 7 nights before the listing could disappear. The flight from Heathrow was 14 hours. I slept badly. Watched 2 films without absorbing either of them. Arrived at Kansai International just after 2 in the afternoon, feeling like something that had been wrung out and left to dry. The subway from the airport took 40 minutes. By the time I found the building, a narrow 4-story structure wedged between a convenience store and a shuttered laundromat on a side street. My legs had the particular heaviness of someone who has been sitting still for too long. Kenji was waiting outside, perhaps 65, small, precise in the way certain men are when they have arranged their lives to contain very few surprises. He bowed, shook my hand briefly, led me up a staircase that smelled faintly of something I could not name. Not unpleasant, not quite pleasant, old wood, and something herbal underneath it. The apartment was on the 2nd floor. He unlocked the door, handed me the key, walked me through the basics, gas hob, shower pressure, recycling, the nearest convenience store. His English was careful, rehearsed. At the door, before he left, he said, "Very quiet building. You will sleep well." He said it the way someone states a fact they have already verified. I said, "I need that." He smiled, small, patient, and went back down the stairs. I stood in the middle of the tatami room with my bag at my feet. Above the front door, tied with a red string, hung a small bundle of dried herbs. I assumed it was decoration. That night I slept 11 hours without moving. In the morning I lay still for a while, staring at the ceiling. I could not remember the last time I had done that, just lain there, without the ceiling pressing back. The first 2 days I spent without a single dark thought. Dotonbori in the afternoon. Takoyaki from a stall so small the cook's elbow nearly touched mine. 100 photographs of things I could not explain the appeal of. Manhole covers, vending machines, the way a convenience store looks from outside at midnight. I came back to the apartment each evening like returning to something I had found and not yet told anyone about. On the second night, just before sleep, I found the hair. One strand on the pillow, long black, very fine. I held it up under the lamp for a moment, set it on the edge of the low table. Housekeeping, I thought. Previous tenant. Someone not thorough enough. I made a note to mention it to Kenji. I forgot immediately and slept deeply again. By the third day, the smell had changed. Still faint. Something I caught only at the doorway when I came in from outside. Sweet and close, like flowers left 2 days too long in a vase. I opened the window and it faded, and I told myself it was drainage. A restaurant kitchen nearby. The way old buildings breathe in October. That evening I found more hair. Not on the pillow. On the tatama floor near the right-hand wall. The wall that, according to the floor plan inside the kitchen cupboard, bordered the unit next door. 4 or 5 strands. Long and black. Gathered near the baseboard. As though carried by a draft. There was no draft. The window had been closed all day. I swept them into a tissue. Dropped them in the bin. Lay down on the futon and stared at the ceiling. My mind drifted back to the hair 2 or 3 times before sleep came. Slower than the nights before. Shallower. On the 4th night, I woke at some point past midnight to a smell that had moved. It was no longer something caught at the doorway. It had settled into the futon, into the tatami, into the air itself. I lay on my back and breathed through my mouth. Organic, sweet in a way that had nothing to do with flowers. I did not name it further than that. I did not want to. I opened the window. The smell did not leave. I lay back down. And then, from the right-hand wall came a sound. Not a knock. Not a voice. One long exhale. Slow. Deliberate. As though something on the other side had been holding its breath for a very long time. And had finally, quietly, let it go. I did not move. The apartment was silent. The city outside was the low murmur it always was at that hour. Distant. Indifferent. I did not sleep again. In the morning, I made coffee on the gas hob and stood at the window and told myself, old buildings settle. Pipes contract in the cold. You are tired. You are the kind of person who listens for things. Almost convinced. Almost. On the 5th day, I had no plan. I walked east along the river, past schools and laundromats and small shrines tucked between buildings as though they had always been there. In the afternoon, I found a cafe near Shinsaibashi. 8 seats. Just quiet enough to ignore. A window facing a narrow lane with bicycles parked in a neat row. I ordered coffee. Opened my phone. Started looking for places to visit the next day. Travel articles, maps, restaurant reviews, ordinary things. Then, between a temple recommendation and an advertisement for a half-day tour, a headline appeared. 5 famous jikobuken in Osaka. Stories behind the cheap properties you should avoid. I clicked. The article was light, almost entertainment. Jikobuken. Properties with a history of death inside them. The law required disclosure, but there were gaps. Informal platforms, short-term rentals, landlords who chose silence. One sentence made me stop. The signs are simple. A price that makes no sense. Almost no reviews. A description that tells you very little. My coffee arrived. I drank it, closed the article, opened a map, looked for somewhere to eat dinner. Almost managed not to think about it again. Almost. I came back that night earlier than I intended. Not because I was tired. The day had been good. One of the best. But at some point, without deciding to, I stood up and started walking back, the body deciding. Not me. The smell reached me at the end of the lane, not inside the building, not in the stairwell, at the end of the lane, in open air, between the cigarette smoke from a man outside the convenience store and the frying oil from the stall 2 doors down. I stopped. For 4 nights, the smell had only come past midnight. Something that woke me from sleep. Something I could file under half-dreaming, under imagination, under the particular sensitivity of a mind that is already tired. But it was 9 in the evening, and the smell was outside. I told myself restaurant, drainage, something from downstairs. I went up. With each step, the smell grew heavier. Not sweet anymore, or still sweet, but a different kind. Something that had no name in my nose except a discomfort that moved upward from my stomach. I stood at the door, key in hand not moving. Go in, I told myself. You have been here 4 nights. Nothing has happened. Go in. I opened the door, and the first thing I saw before the futon, before my bag in the corner, before anything else in the room, was the table. A clump of hair. On the center of the table, long, black, the kind that falls from a brush when a woman finishes combing her hair and sets it down. Not scattered, not drifted, just left there. Something in my chest stopped for a moment, then hit twice as hard. I did not step inside. My feet did not move, and I did not tell them to stop. That is what happened. My feet did not move, and my body followed that decision while my mind was still somewhere behind, still producing explanations. It was there this morning. You did not notice. I remembered the table this morning. I had set my phone on it while looking for my jacket. The table was empty. It fell from your bag when you came in. My bag was still on my back. A draft from the window. The window had been closed since the 3rd night. My feet finally carried me inside. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, as far from the table as the room allowed. I opened my phone and typed the name of the street into the search bar, not knowing what I was looking for, just needing my hands to do something so the rest of me could pretend to be calm. Ordinary results. A map, some reviews, then a forum thread that made my thumb stop scrolling. Did you ever accidentally rent a Jiko bucken? Share your experience. I opened it. Read, a woman in Kyoto, a man in Sapporo, cheap prices, strange smells, histories that were never mentioned. Someone in the middle of the thread named a database, a site where you could check any address before signing a lease. I opened the site, typed in the building address, paused. Then, with fingers that moved before I had finished deciding whether this was something I wanted to do, I typed the unit number. The page loaded slowly, too slowly. I almost closed it. A woman's name I did not recognize. A date in 2020. Japanese characters that my translation app processed for several seconds before rendering. Solitary death. Discovered after approximately 18 days. I read it. In the corner of my eye, the hair was still on the table. Not moving, just sitting there, like it had been left by someone who had no reason to hurry. Different unit in the same building, said a voice in my head. The one that was starting to sound like someone who knows they have already lost. Database might be wrong. The numbering system here could be different. This could be a mistake. But my feet were already standing. My hands were already inside my bag, pulling out clothes, rolling them in ways that were not neat, pushing them back in. My mind was still somewhere behind, still assembling the last of its arguments, while my hands kept moving, because it was not my mind giving the orders anymore. Something older than thought was doing it. Something that had no interest in being reasonable. 18 days, the zipper closed. I stood, lifted the bag onto my shoulder. And for 1 second, that did not need to happen but happened anyway. My eyes went back to the table. The hair was still there, in the center of the table, the way it looks when someone finishes combing and simply walks away, not in a hurry, and with no reason to be. I turned off the light, walked out, did not look back. Kenji was beside his car when I came down. Engine off, not doing anything I could see. When he saw me with my bag, he did not ask. He simply held out his hand. I gave him the key. I wanted to ask how many times he had stood here like this, taking back a key from someone leaving earlier than planned. I wanted to ask about the herbs above the door, about what he thought they were doing. What came out was, there is hair on the table. Inside, something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise, something older than surprise, and more tired. I will take care of it, he said. I believed him completely. That was the part one could not stop thinking about afterward. Not the hair, not the smell, not the sound from the wall. The fact that I believed him, and that believing him meant understanding he had done this before, and would do it again, and had found a way to keep doing it. I walked to the end of the lane and turned the corner and kept walking until the building was behind me. I found another hotel that night, proper one, high floor, a window that looked out over the city lights, a room with no history anyone had thought to hide. I showered for a long time with the bathroom light on and the door open. Then I lay in the unfamiliar bed and looked at the ceiling. I finished the trip. Kyoto. A morning in Arashiyama when the mist was still low over the bamboo, and the only sounds were footsteps and birds and the quiet of a place that had been quiet for a very long time. Japan gave me what I came for, just not in the way I expected. I still travel. I still love Japan, but I do not laugh at prices anymore. I do not feel lucky when something seems too good to be true, because I know what that usually means now. It means someone decided that what you do not know is a problem they can live with. She was there in 2020, when the whole world had closed its doors and stopped checking on each other, when being alone was not unusual, when no one knocking on your door for days meant nothing at all. 18 days. She had a name. I read it once and I still remember it. Some nights I wake at 3 in the morning for no reason. My own room, my own ceiling, walls I have known for years. But in the half-second before my eyes find the familiar shapes, I listen. There is a Japanese term, jiko bukken. It means accident property, a place where someone has died, usually alone, sometimes undiscovered. Landlords are required by law to tell you, but the law has gaps, and some landlords know exactly where those gaps are. Before you book anywhere with a price that makes no sense, search the address. There are databases. Takes 30 seconds. She had a name. She had 18 days. The least you can do is 30 seconds. I stopped believing in those stories a long time ago. High school, maybe earlier. What I know is that when I moved to Tokyo in my 20s, I left the village stories behind along with everything else I did not pack. Mud boots, an accent too thick for the city, and all the whispered things about what should not be standing in the rice fields during summer. Kunekune. I still remember how the children said it, in low voices, with their shoulders pulling slightly upward, as though their bodies knew something their mouths had not yet decided to say. I had been away from Akita for 12 years. 12 years is long enough to forget many things, but not long enough to forget how those fields look in winter. Aji-san passed on a Tuesday, not suddenly. He had been ill for some time and I knew it was coming. But when my mother's call came through during a mid-morning meeting, the shift I felt in my chest was not something I could explain to the colleagues waiting for me to continue. The Shinkansen from Tokyo to Akita takes just under 4 hours. I sat and watched Japan run backwards outside the window. The family house felt smaller than I remembered. It always does, my mother said, with a tired smile. You grew. The house did not shrink. Aunts had arrived. Uncles. Cousins I did not recognize because the last time I saw them they came up to my knee. The first night was full of voices and food and people taking turns touching my arm and saying kind things about Aji-san. I slept in my old room. The same mattress. The same ceiling. And from the same window, if I stood and looked north, the field was still out there. Frozen. Empty. White under thin snow. I did not stand at the window that night. I was too tired. The funeral was on the second day. A long procession, full of ceremony, full of a silence that had weight to it. Afterward, a meal together, lighter conversation, memories of Aji-san that made some people laugh and made others look briefly away. Late afternoon, when the last guests began to leave, I stepped outside alone to the back porch. The air in Akita in winter is different from Tokyo. Cleaner, more still. Breath comes out as thin steam and disappears. I stood there for a while, looking toward the field. A winter field in Akita is something specific. Not beautiful in any dramatic way, just a wide flat expanse, the cut rice stalks poking through the snow like small black marks, and a white sky that meets white ground at the horizon so gradually it is difficult to say where one ends and the other begins. Nothing out there. Of course not. Winter. No farmers. No birds. No wind strong enough to move anything. I went back inside. My mother asked if I was cold. No, I said. Just needed some air. Most of the guests had gone by the third day. Only the close family remained. My mother, Uncle Hideo, whose house was farthest and who was staying one more night. 2 young cousins whose parents still had business in the city. The afternoon was quiet. I helped my mother pack up the sitting room, wrap the leftover food, wash the borrowed dishes. Toward evening, when the light had dropped low and the field had turned a gray-blue color, I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea, and without meaning to, I looked out the window. Something was in the field. I did not notice it immediately. My eyes simply passed over the window the way you look at a window without really seeing what is outside. But then something at the edge of my vision pulled me back. White, in the middle of the field, far enough away, a white shape, slightly whiter than the snow around it, slightly more upright than the remaining rice stalks. I watched it. Wind, I thought. Agricultural plastic. A sack left behind. Those things exist in fields. But there was no wind that afternoon. And the shape was moving. Not moving the way something blown by wind moves. Moving the way something breathing moves. Twisting slowly from the top downward in a way that did not have a name I could immediately find. I set my teacup down. How long I stared at it, I do not know. Long enough for my mother to come in and ask if the tea had gone cold. I turned to look at her, asked almost without meaning to ask whether people often worked in the field next door during winter. She shrugged. That field had not been tended for 2 seasons, since the Tanaka family moved to Sendai. I looked out the window again. The field was empty. Nothing there. Only snow and small black stalks and the darkening sky. I shook my head. Nothing, I said. Just looking. I did not sleep well the third night. Not because I was frightened. I was not frightened. I was a 35-year-old man who worked in a financial analysis department in Tokyo, and I was not sleeping because my mind was still at the office, because there were reports unfinished, because Aji-san's death still sat in me like something I had not yet fully processed. Not because of something white in a field that was probably just plastic. Probably just my eyes, tired, in the strange light of a winter afternoon. But around 2 in the morning I woke and, without knowing why, walked to the window. The field under moonlight. Empty. I stood there for some time. Breath fogged the glass. Then I went back to bed and lay on my back and stared at the same ceiling I had stared at when I was 12 years old and did not yet know that some things are wiser not to think about too carefully. Uncle Hideo said goodbye after breakfast on the fourth day. Before leaving, while putting on his coat at the front entrance, he said something I did not immediately understand. Aji-san used to say, Uncle Hideo told me that the field next door should not be stared at too long in winter, especially in the afternoon. I waited for him to continue. He did not continue. He simply fastened his scarf, bowed, and walked to his car. I stood at the entrance until his car disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside and sat at the dining table and did not look at the window. For almost an hour I did not look at the window. Then, very slowly, the way someone does something that was not their own decision, I looked at the window. The field was empty. Of course it was. I let out a breath I had not noticed I was holding. I opened my laptop and began working on the overdue report. 40 minutes later, I realized I had not typed a single word. I had simply sat there with the bright screen in front of me, looking at nothing in particular. And something small and uncomfortable had begun moving in the back of my head. I was supposed to go home to Tokyo on the 5th day. Ticket already booked. For in the afternoon, my mother had prepared a bento for the journey, the way she always did. That morning I helped with a few more things. Carrying boxes, moving furniture slightly, small tasks for adult hands that did not come home often enough. Just before noon, my mother went inside to cook and I sat alone on the back porch. A clear day by Akita winter standards. Sun low but present. Pale blue sky, long shadows on the snow, and in the field, in roughly the same place as the afternoon before. The white shape was there again. I saw it and something in my chest did something I cannot describe precisely. Not a jump, not a stop, more like a shift. Something moving 1 centimeter to the left and not returning. Plastic, I told myself. A sack. Something blown in from the untended field next door. But I kept watching it. It moved, slowly, twisting from the top downward in the same way as before, in a way that plastic does not move, that sacks do not move, that things without breath do not move. How long I watched it, I do not know. What I know is that at some point my mother opened the porch door and said lunch was ready, and I turned to look at her, and when I looked back at the field, the shape was gone. And I noticed that my feet had moved 2 steps forward from the edge of the porch. I did not remember moving them. On the Shinkansen back to Tokyo, I sat by the window and watched Japan running forward this time. I did not open my mother's bento. I thought about what I had seen, went through the possibilities. Exhaustion, strange light, eyes that deceive after several days of poor sleep and unfinished grief. All of it made sense. All of it. I picked up my phone, almost searched for something, put it back down. Some things are better left unsearched. The train slowed into the next station. Someone sat in the seat beside me. I looked out at the clean platform and the orderly lights and thought, Tokyo. A place that makes sense. A place that can be explained. But at the very edge of my vision, for a fraction of a second, something white outside the window moved in a way that was wrong. I turned to look, just a light pole passing by. Of course, I faced forward again, and for the first time on that journey, I noticed that I could not remember the last time I had blinked. That was 3 months ago. Since then I have been fine, working as usual, eating as usual, sleeping mostly as usual. Only a few small things are different. Sometimes I find myself standing at the window of my apartment on the 8th floor, looking down at the busy street below, without remembering walking there. Sometimes in meetings I lose the thread of the conversation for a few seconds. Not long. Long enough for the colleague beside me to tap the table gently and ask if I am all right. And sometimes, at night, when the lights are off and I am lying in bed, there is a small part of my mind that will not stop thinking about the way something moves, twisting, from the top downward. Slowly, like breathing. I have not gone back to Akita since. My mother has called twice asking when I will visit. I always find a reason, but last night, for the first time, I dreamed about that field. A long, silent dream, no sound at all except my own breathing. And in the middle of the field was a white shape I recognized, twisting slowly, and in the dream I was walking toward it. I woke before I arrived, or at least, I think I woke. Kunekune. I said I do not believe in those stories, and I do not. Only there is one detail I always remembered from the oldest version of the story, the one that circulated through the villages of Tohoku before it spread anywhere else. It said that people who stared too long do not feel anything immediately. They go home. They eat. They sleep. They are fine. For a while.